Welcome. This is the Free Market Roadshow, probably the largest annual series of public conferences on economics. Remarkable experts are discussing the challenges and providing libertarian solutions to today's problems. Organized by the Austrian Economics Center in cooperation with select institutes, universities and think tanks, the Free Market Roadshow tours all over Europe. Hello and welcome everybody around the world. My name is Barbara Kolm and it's my pleasure to be a host today at the Digital Free Market Roadshow event in Vienna, Austria. Let me introduce you to the Hayek Institute. We're a group of freedom-loving individuals with all fields of expertise, and we meet in the spirit of Friedrich Hayek. As a think tank, we conduct research and analysis on economic and socio-economic questions, all based on the principles of the Austrian economics. As libertarians, we love arguing, so discussions play a huge role in our events. There is no lecture, no presentation, no event without questioning the argument. But there are, of course, principles we consider very important for freedom and, of course, for democracy that we need to take into consideration. Those are individual freedom, individual responsibility, entrepreneurial thinking, and the rule of law. At the Hayek Institute, we believe in the positive power of markets, its self-regulation, and in limited state intervention. As an independent think tank, we've been partnering with the Free Market Roadshow ever since its beginning in 2008. So if you want to learn more, please have a look at the website Hayek-Institute.at after our event. Hello everybody here in Vienna. My name is Barbara Kolm and it's my pleasure to kick off the first Free Market Roadshow event of 2021. Today we discuss market economy, trade and geopolitics, ways out of the gridlock. Our first keynote speaker will be Gunnar Hökmark, who is the president of Stockholm Free World Forum and former member of the European Parliament. Before he was member of the parliament, he was also a member of the Swedish Riksdag for Stockholm County from 1982 until 2004. And he was also vice chairman of the EPP group, the largest group in the European Parliament. Without further ado, I would like to ask Gunnar to present his keynote. Before we will have a panel discussion with Gerald Gerstbauer, Gerald Loacker and Bylund. Looking forward to hearing Gunnar's remarks now. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to say some words about freedom and the free world. Free Market Roadshow is a fantastic phenomena, a fantastic way of communicating with each other in the times we're living in the pandemic, but also during a time when our fundamental values are threatened, maybe more than ever in modern times. I say more than ever in modern times because we are now living, not as in the Cold War, in a time of containment, with the Iron Curtain or the bamboo curtain, dividing the world in two parts, the first world and the second world, and then we have the third world beside that. But now we have a time of diffusion, where societies are in some way able to work on each other's different territories, and due to their laws and legislations. Dictatorships can use the freedom of free societies in order to work for their aims and destructive goals. This is a difficult time, and we can see, if we look past, we have seen 3 decades, 30 years of fantastic global economic development. Market economy and free trade has been able to defeat poverty in country after country, region after region. Poverty does still exist, but it is extremely important to underline that those of us who believe in free trade and globalization have seen a victory for our ideas. More people than ever are having the opportunity and the privilege to live in prosperity. Some in less prosperity and some in more prosperity. But the overall trend has been that market economy has defeated not only planned economies as such, but market economy in its practice has defeated planned economy in its theories. Very few, except the die-harders, do still believe in the planned economy. They exist. And they sometimes seek other arguments. They are protectionists. They don't want to have change. They have nationalistic goals. They want the state to steer and to govern more of a society than before. But they always come short of the fact that their ideas are failing when our ideas are working and providing people with prosperity and freedom. During the last 30 years, we have seen this fantastic development. And now we see our values threatened in a number of different ways. One is because of the dramatic geopolitical changes we have seen. When Barack Obama came into power in 2009, the US economy and the economy of the European Union were more or less of the same size, something about 14 to 15 trillion dollars, while the Chinese were only at $5 trillion. I'm talking about GDP. And Russia, it had $1.5 trillion. That was the big picture at that time. And I say this because these figures are not only about prosperity, they are also about political strength and influence. Economic strength is crucial for political influence and ability to develop the world today. So, US and European Union, more or less the same size regarding economy, 14 to 15 trillion dollars, China $5 trillion and Russia 1.5. Today, we have seen a tectonic change because today, China and European Union are having more or less the same size. China, $16 trillion, European Union, a little bit more than that, and US, $22 trillion, and Russia, $1.5 trillion. So Russia, who was the main threat during the Cold War, a main global threat during the Cold War, is today globally a marginal player. It still is dominant and defining the security in Europe, but from a global perspective, it is playing a marginal role because of its shrinking economy and the failure of the Putin regime. But China, by adopting, I wouldn't say market economy, but by adopting state capitalism, has been able to use the best of the economic forces of market economy in a political, corrupt system and a dictatorship. And it has worked in that sense that the economic freedom that has been injected in the dictatorship has given an enormous economic development and economic strength. So now we see a global world where US and European Union are playing a smaller role than before. The transatlantic economy is something like 40% of the global economy, and the rest is 60%, of course. Which means that these two main entities for market economy and democracy that United States and European Union has been for decades during all modern time, they are relatively much weaker than ever before. And the other forces in the world, China, the rest of Asia, Latin America, the emerging economies in Africa, they are all together bigger than there has ever been before compared to the transatlantic economy. And once again, while the transatlantic economy has been deeply rooted in democracy and market economy, that is not the case for other parts of the world. More or less democracy, more or less rule of law, but not the same stability as we have seen in these two entities. And the main threat treading forward now is, of course, China. And please be very clear about one thing. China is not a market economy with what we normally mean with a market economy. There exists no real freedom in China. Market economy is preconditioned to have freedom. And free trade is, of course, preconditioning freedom in societies, because otherwise it's not a free trade. China is today using its economic power for influence and for threats and for actions against the free world, attacking those who criticize the dictatorship, criticize their behavior on the international scene, criticizing their regional ambitions and criticizing their ambitions all over the world, because they are acting with the logic of the dictatorship. So how should we face that? First of all, I think we need to have a new, some sort of re-revolution of market economy ideas. We need to secure that the digital economy is developed on the basis of freedom and market economy and entrepreneurship. I think it is important that digital platforms, social platforms, are following the same laws that we have in all societies. But we shall not globally try to regulate them, because then the regimes of the despots and the authoritarians will undermine the freedom. We need to call upon them to behave as they say they do. They need to be transparent. But let's welcome that successful companies are having success, because otherwise we will not have successful followers. We will not have new successful companies all over the world. That's one thing. The second thing is we need to secure free trade. And free trade must be free trade. And we need to secure that China is not using other countries' freedom in order to enhance its power versus us. I think the time is ripe for the free world to become the free world as an entity. We need to gather. Because in spite of the fact that China is an emerging strong economy and in 10 or 20 years' time with the biggest economy, still the free world is much, much, much more bigger. European Union, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and a lot of other countries. And together we can form a nucleus, a momentum for standing up for freedom and telling all those authoritarians how to behave on the global scene. How to behave regarding economy and trade, but also how to behave regarding democracy and freedom. But there is one common denominator in all this. That is, we can't do it alone. We need European Union to stand up for this, but we need to have a strong transatlantic link for this. We need to show that European Union is a strong partner to US, not a little brother. We are a strong partner to US because in US you need to know that there is a strong partner also safeguarding freedom and democracy. The time is not for anyone to say that my nation is first. The time is for all of us to say freedom and market economy and democracy is first. And that is, I would say, the main task for all of us believing in freedom and market economy. Setting freedom and market economy first, because by then we are putting people and individuals first. That is our common task. Let's do that, and let's make the free world to an entity that can create strength and provide better opportunities for all people in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gunnar Hökmark, for this thought-provoking remarks. You indeed set the standard, and it's now my privilege to welcome my panel here in Vienna that we host, and it will be Gerald Gerstbauer, Gerald Loacker, and Bylund who will be joining us any minute, and I will take the liberty to introduce the gentlemen before their first introductory statements. But I would like to remind the audience, also from the live stream via Facebook and YouTube, that you are able to put up questions on the streams anytime, and we will go through them at the discussion. But without further ado, I would now ask Gerald Loacker first to join us on the panel.
Hello, greetings from the western province from Vorarlberg, at the Lake of Constance.
Let me just introduce you briefly. Gerald Loacker studied law with a focus on finance and business in Vienna and human resources and organizational development in Innsbruck. He was working for the Vorarlberger Chamber of Commerce. Vorarlberg is the most western province in Austria. It's bordering to Switzerland and Liechtenstein and Germany there. And he has also worked for a couple of Vorarlberg industry groups and industries. He was working at HR management of Rondo Canal, but then he moved to the Dornbirner Sparkasse, so he was in finance and business, where he is currently also HR manager. Actually, he was HR manager until February 26. Apologies. He was elected to the National Council in 2013 and has been a member of the National Council ever since then, and was the spokesperson for NEOS on social issues. And he also held the position of the deputy chairman of the club of the NEOS party at the Austrian parliament. And without further ado, Gerald, the floor is yours. Please give us your introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, for the friendly introduction. Yes, Gunnar Hökmark has addressed a number of important topics of this time, and I pick the freedom to choose one particular topic he addressed, and that is state capitalism, seen in the example of China. We tend to look at China a bit suspiciously and thinking of them as being only state-ruled while we are the nations of freedom. But if we have a critical look at what happens in Europe, this is also a kind of state capitalism. Just remember how many states invested millions of euros in airlines, for example, airlines that would have gone bankrupt otherwise, or how huge amounts of money are invested in short-time work in many different countries in the European Union. But the difference between the Chinese state capitalism and this European Union state capitalism is that the Chinese don't do this to preserve old structures. The Chinese do it with a political impetus to gain influence, while the Europeans spend the taxpayers' money on preserving old structures, on preserving old companies that would otherwise die. So it's state capitalism on both sides, but with totally different aims. And we recently had a delegation from China as guests in the parliament in Vienna. And we discussed how strong are the nations and how strong are the states themselves in the country. And the Chinese were perplexed to hear that the public spending ratio in Austria is beyond 50%, while in China it is some 33-34%. In Germany it's 45%. So the state has a lot of influence in typical European welfare states. What we do not see in this time is that the growing influence of the state not only provides maybe better welfare, but it also cuts down personal freedom in slices. As the state is made responsible for everything, the individual is responsible for less, but has to offer personal freedom to be protected. And we tend to get used to this protection. What I do not yet see is a counter movement, a strong counter movement. There's still a growing political influence of those who want more state and more state protection. For example, in German-speaking nations today, you hear the call for a basic income for each and everyone. While on the other hand, we're in fact having problems financing the system as it is, politicians and a lot of the public discuss more welfare for everyone, regardless of who needs this welfare. And this, at first sight, seems to offer freedom. You get money, and then you can do what you want. It gives you the freedom to do what you want. But this is in fact a lie. It redeems the politicians of caring for a free economy that creates jobs, a free economy that creates wealth, because everybody has its basic income anyway, so they don't have to be cared for anymore. This basic income is a very, very dangerous idea. And what we also should have in mind is the modernization of a kind of protectionism that the COVID crisis has brought up. Remember, about a year ago, it was Germany that stopped the transport of protective materials to other European countries. A thing that could not have been imagined only a year previous to that. And now the European Union discusses to produce vaccines and medicines on its own, because Europe is so dependent on the production in China and in India. And if we have a thorough look at how the production of vaccines and medicines works, we see it's not the states who do it. It was science and it was companies that developed vaccines very, very quickly. And it's those strong states that now fail to bring those vaccines to their people. And here's the chance that I see in the COVID crisis, that we remember and that people see that it's not the state that saves them. It's science and it's the free economy that brings them the vaccines to help them out of the crisis. And by repeating this success story of free market and of science, we can strengthen the idea of free market for a better future. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Gerald. This was a pretty good summary of where the European freedoms or four freedoms actually failed and where they would probably succeed. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Gerald Gerstbauer, who is my next guest. And let me briefly introduce Gerald. Gerald is not only the CEO at Gerstbauer Strategic, but he's also the Senior Vice President at Atos and for Central and Eastern Europe, responsible for public affairs and institutional relations. And after working at the Austrian Social Insurance and at the Federal Ministry of Employment, Health and Social Welfare, he began his work at Siemens Business Services in 2000 as a manager for several departments. So he's been into industry, especially in the IT industry, for a very long time. But he also wears another hat, and this is the hat of the president of Atos, which is the Austrian Azerbaijani Chamber of Commerce. So Gerald is very much into building bridges, into trade agreements, into free trade. His background as an not only as an entrepreneur and as his own with his own management firm, where he's consulting a variety of all clients across the globe. Gerald holds a degree from California State University, Hayward, the Immerdeck University, and in SEAD in Fontainebleau. So without further ado, Gerald, the floor is yours, and we are all looking forward to hearing from what you have to say on our topic today, ways out of the gridlock, free market economy, trade, and geopolitics. Thank you. The floor.
Yeah, hello. Thanks a lot. For this very, very introduction words. It's very hard to speak after. So Gerald Loacker did this really, really a very good job. So I really like to limit my statement to a little bit what I feel in this pandemic and what I think where we could progress in the right direction. So I look back to working starting in the early 80s. So world around us changed dramatically. For all of us, and especially in this 18 months of pandemic, the most of us did their jobs from at home, remote, via Zoom or Teams or other possibilities we have to collaborate. And maybe not so much of this panel because we did it also before, but for the most people, they are not familiar. They learned to work in a very virtual surrounding. And what I like to say at the beginning is this changing surrounding in our work life is not reflected in the situation around in our social institutions. So I'm in general very positive to all our institutions we developed the last 150 years. I think also through this pandemic, it was very helpful to have developed systems of hospitals in Austria. There was never the situation bad also in the hospital in Austria to care about the people, but in the system, the general system are based in the 50s and 60s of the last century, and all the acting political parties, politicians, trade unions, chamber of commerce, from my feeling, didn't care about really reforming these institutions. I'm not a fan of cutting social expenses. I'm not a fan of cutting expenses for the health system, but I'm really a fan to allocate it in the right direction and to question every time and permanently, do we have the right efficiency? Do we have the right partners for these systems? The pandemic, in my feeling, also blocked reform developments. So what we have to do after surfing these problems and maybe coming to a little bit more normal life here in Central Europe is to make a really sharp analysis about the learnings, about the doings. It's unbelievable for me that we cannot, that the European Union and Austria are not able to buy on the world market enough vaccines for the whole population. It's more or less, it's a disaster. It's really a disaster. And if you look to other countries like Serbia, they really do a good job in this. Or if you look to UK or finally also to the States, where I think the first pandemic management were more or less a disaster. But now they are able to vaccine their people, they are able to protect them, and we are still discussing things. They should not, also in a free economy, it's for me impossible not to find the right way, the right people, the right management to buy enough vaccines for the population, as one example. So at the end, from the transformation of our society, I see the future that we will have a very challenging time. We have also to rebuild our society after the pandemic to get public institutions a little bit less influential. So now they are caring about the time when we are at home. They are caring about where we have to go. They are caring about everything at the moment. And don't understand me wrong. I'm supporting all these activities. I don't think that there is a other way to serve this pandemic as to limit our possibility to travel and to also to limit the people to get infected. But after we are all hopefully received our vaccines, end of the year, maybe next year, and then there will upcoming be the next wave. We will be vaccinated a second, a third time. Everything should work and should help to come to a normal life. We have to be really open a discussion. What are the learnings? What do we need as regulations? What do we don't need as regulations? So especially in our working life, I think there is the need to question a lot of things. Many people also in the future will work at home, mainly at home. How will we discuss this regulation? How will it be decided? So these are the questions also to be competitive against other societies. And I'm not so skeptic that our society at the end, a free economy or a democracy, will be the leading world system. I'm not afraid that we will all run in systems like in Russia or in China, or also close near to Austria. I see in some countries really critical development. I think here in the middle of Europe, Germany, Austria, France, people are mainly sticking to our democracy, to the parliamentarian system, to the freedom to vote, and this is what to fight for, to defend, and after the pandemic also to find a normal way to have participation in the society, and to force back a little bit or more the state influence in our whole life we had in the last 12 months here in Austria. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Gerald, for this nice summary and of how our societies, especially the European one, should be transformed in the next couple of years, and maybe also what learnings we can take from the current crisis that we see. And also maybe the good thing that you pointed out the failure where the European Union is at its current limits and where we need to work on in form of division of labor, as the Austrian economists always plead, where we can improve our societies and our current status. Without further ado, and since this is a nice bridge between the both Geralds, one from the very political angle and the other one from the very societal and entrepreneurial angle, I would like to ask Per Bylund, our next speaker, to the floor. Per, a Swede, actually currently living in the United States. He's an assistant professor of entrepreneurship and Records Johnson Professor of the Free Enterprise in the School of Entrepreneurship at Oklahoma State University, is based in the US currently. Per is also an associate editor of the Journal of Entrepreneurship and Public Policy and the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics. He's also a fellow with the Mises Institute in Auburn, and he's an associate fellow with the Ratio Institute in Stockholm, Sweden. He has his MBA in political science from Lund University, and as I mentioned, currently living in the US. He's the author of A Problem of Production, A New Theory of the Firm, which was published by Routledge in 2016, and The Seen, the Unseen, and the Unrealized, How Regulations Affect Our Everyday Lives, published by Lexington in 2016. And he was the co-author or editor, actually, of The Next Generation of Austrian Economics, essays in honor of Joseph T. Salerno. Per is currently working on 2 new books. One is on entrepreneurship, and the other one is A Modern Guide to Austrian Economics. Without further ado, I would like to ask Per to give us also the theoretical framework that we might need for underpinning our discussion. And again, I might remind you on bringing in questions that you have for our distinguished panelists that we will share after Per's remarks. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Barbara. So yes, I wanted to follow up on one comment that Gunnar made in his keynote, where he said that, let me quote exactly, market economies in practice have defeated planned economies in theory. Now, think about that. It's a very strong statement. He's really saying that market economies, which are hardly free market economies, they're semi-planned or mixed economies, have completely outdone even the promise of centrally planned economies. Now, how could this be, and why is this the case? Well, I will claim that it is necessarily the case because you cannot have a planned economy. You must have an open and free economy, or it's not an economy at all. So if we think about where we are today and the wealth and prosperity that we are enjoying, the real question is not how much do we have or who has it even, but the question is, how did we get here? What are the processes and mechanisms in the economy that took us to where we are today that can help us understand also where we might be tomorrow? And it might help us, and it will help us, also structure the best possible tomorrows. And in my professional life, I study entrepreneurship, and what I do there is look at how entrepreneurs are involved in creating our tomorrows. So the entrepreneur is really core to this process in the economy that creates the tomorrow that we will enjoy or not enjoy so much. Now, this requires freedom for the simple reason that we will not be satisfied if we're given only what someone has planned. And we will not only be satisfied if we can choose to do so in whatever way we see fit. So it has to be, satisfaction is a personal value. Satisfaction is how we are better off in our own terms. So it's an individual concept in the sense, it's subjective, which means that you cannot really compare between different people. You cannot really compare over time either, other than in terms of the possibilities of leading a good life, or how well off you are as a person, and then how well off people in society are overall. Now, how do we accomplish this? What are the processes that bring about a better state of living, a higher standard of living? Well, since we cannot know exactly what people will want, we must have a decentralized system where as many people as possible get to try their luck and attempt to create what they think, to the best of their knowledge and the best of their imagination, will be of value to other people. Now, since the people receiving these goods, since people buying stuff in the market, people using things, they will change, and they will also change their preferences and change their views of the world depending on what they see around them. Entrepreneurs are sort of in a very difficult situation because they need to figure out not only how people are, they also have to figure out amongst themselves what to produce and how to produce it, how much of each thing. Now, the market economy does that simply through allowing them to pursue profits under the threat of suffering losses. What that means is that, well, if they believe very strongly that they can produce something that is of value to other people, then they can pursue that, but they will personally suffer if it's wrong. So if they do not pull the plug on that project soon enough, or if they stick to it and it turns out to be wrong, they suffer. They will lose potentially everything. And that is a great balancing act or counterbalance to the lure of profit. So it doesn't matter how greedy you are. If you risk losing it all, then you are going to balance your act. You are going to try to find a middle way, and you're not going to go for everything because it might be very, very risky. And of course, in the market economy, the way you earn a profit is by serving others. So you serve yourself by serving others, and there's no other way to do this. Now, I wanted to touch also on Matt Ridley's book from last year, How Innovation Works, because he really brings home this same point, that because of freedom, we have all these ingenious people innovating or trying new things. And that's a small part of it. It's very, very important because only by trying these different things can we figure out what is actually of value, what is actually workable. But it's not only the innovation. It's also the whole entrepreneurial process that needs to be intact, that needs to be decentralized, that needs to be a single process built up of all these pieces. Now, what this means then is that you cannot really plan a society, because the planning of any society will necessarily use the data that we have today. So it will base the planning on what we see today. But what we see today is a product of what we did yesterday. And what we see tomorrow is a product of what we do today. And many of these production processes are very long, and they take a long time to conclude and to produce a product. As an example, producing a new type of automobile can take 5 years from starting of planning it to when you actually have it ready and offer it to consumers. A lot of things change in those 5 years. There are a lot of things that change consumers' perceptions, consumers' wants, what consumers like and what they don't like. And there are many entrepreneurs offering them different types of goods, and the world might be very different. And you simply cannot plan this because you have to make up your mind on exactly what to do, when to do it, and in what quantities and at what qualities, which means you have to turn the whole economy on its head. So the way the market economy works is that it aims to consistently create value for people, and people decide themselves after the fact if there has been value created. Now, for the planner, it's different. The planner needs to determine first what to do and doesn't even care about the value produced. Why is that? Well, because as soon as you offer a little freedom, which is necessary for people to make the best out of their situation, well, that means also that some of the productions will not be chosen by people because they will simply want something else. And that means that production fails too. So there are really two alternatives, and Gunnar did not stress this, but he pointed out the power of market economies and the necessity of having a little bit of freedom for the simple reason that if you have a little freedom, you will have a lot of productivity. If you have a little freedom, then people will have much, much better lives. China is a good example of this, even though China, of course, is not very free at all. And the promise of the future is really in stopping the planning. Try to plan as little as possible and let people trade with each other and let people attempt to serve themselves by serving others. That is how the free market works and how the market tends to work, and that is not how state capitalism in the China sense works, which means Chinese development might actually just be a little blip. Either it will implode or it will implode the Chinese regime. Those are the only two alternatives, the way I see it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Per, for those insights. And as interestingly, I also took note of Gunnar's remarks that you started with the planned economy that doesn't work. And you gave me the perfect opportunity to promote the new edition of the Road to Serfdom, in German, Der Weg zur Knechtschaft, that we republished. Again, it's Hayek's opus magnum, one of his first opus magnum. Well, he wrote many, putting it this way, but it's the Reader's Digest version, where he elaborates on the central planners and how they fail. And all three of you mentioned the central planning in different ways. And I have the first questions from the floor now, and I would simply open them up to you, unless, and you can also respond to each other while answering those questions. So the first question is here. The problem in our country, currently in Austria, obviously, is that everybody's saved, especially in the health industry. So cutting costs, stuff was not replaced, and probably the lady thinks that we saved. Martina is her name. Martina thinks that we saved at the wrong place. Gerald Gerstbauer was actually mentioning this, that we have to look into the places where cost cuts. And he said he didn't want the cost cutting. He actually thinks one has to look at whether the money is spent, taxpayers' money is spent efficiently. So would you like to respond to these remarks? And maybe we can also see something or learn something from Per. What you have the insights from the US and Sweden as well. So the first one was Gerald Loacker to respond, and then Per. And then it's over to you, Gerald.
No, it's fine.
Please.
Thank you very much. I think it's kind of a fairy tale that there has been cost cuts in the Austrian health system. I don't know where you find them. We have some provinces that tried to cut down on medicines, but they did not efficiently cut down on hospital resources. To the contrary, if you compare Austria with Switzerland, similar size of country, Austria has 60% more beds in hospitals than Switzerland. So there is no cut on anything. The problem is that the system is not efficient. We have the social insurance system that pays for the doctors that care for people in their own offices, and the provinces that pay for the hospitals. And each of the two tries to avoid costs, which means that the social insurance system does not do any prevention work, waits until people get really sick, then they end up in the hospital, and the province has to pay, not the social insurance system. That's an inefficient system that costs a lot but doesn't benefit the people.
Thank you, Gerald. Per, briefly, because I have a whole list of questions.
All right. So I think the question, as well as Gerald's comment, really goes to what I was saying about the difference between entrepreneurship and state, or a state system. And Gerald put it well, that they are focusing on costs, and that's exactly the problem. In any public system, they're focusing on costs because the budget is already set, and they only have mandates for what to produce. In the market, the cost is always secondary. Why? Because you're aiming for value, and cost is what justifies producing that value, right? So you're choosing your costs, fine, but you're choosing first of all the value that you can produce. For any public organization, it's the other way around. You are not actually producing value. You're not maximizing the value produced. You're limiting the cost, which means any cut will always be made in an inefficient manner, and you will always end up with a lot of waste. And one way of looking at this is you mentioned, Barbara, both Sweden and the US. And the bigger the system, the more wasteful it is. The United States system is highly regulated, highly state-based, even though we like to think about it as a market economy because there are insurance companies. But it's super expensive. And Sweden's system is much, much smaller. So it's less inefficient in that sense, but both systems are disasters.
Thank you. Gerald.
Only one sentence. I think politicians have to decide who is doing what. So if you look to Israel, one of the success stories for vaccinating people is the existing health insurance in Israel. So the government handed over completely the vaccination of the population to the health insurance. And this makes sense because they know everyone, like in Austria. Everyone in Austria and in Israel has social insurance. They know the indication of the people. They know the people who are not healthy. They have risks, and it's a perfect system for vaccination. So you have to decide case to case what should the state do, what should the health insurance do, and what should others do. And this was in my statement that since the 60s this was never questioned in Austria. It's not a bad system, but it's a system which could be much more efficient.
Thank you, Gerald. I have a question here by Federico Fernandez, who actually asks, and this is actually to what you already mentioned, that the power grab by politicians and state institutions, and he asked whether these powers will be devolved to society or will they be kept by the government? What is your take on that? I know as Austrian economists, we don't predict the future. There is no such thing as full information, but you have a good feeling on the data that we observe and the models we see. So what is your take? Where will the trend go? More government, less government, more private interventions and private solutions? What is your take, gentlemen?
Who should start?
The one who suffers the most answering this question.
My opinion is it will be different from country to country. If you look to more the eastern part of the European Union, I'm afraid that the state takes over more and more. But it's not only the state; it's a group of people who are taking over. So this is for me not a discussion between state and government and free society and free economy. A powerful group of people are taking over societies, and I'm not so afraid in the western part of the European Union. We are in a functioning democracy, and we will have maybe in Germany a political shift in September to a more left-wing parliament. But this will not change dramatically the situation. So it's a stable, long-term will come back to the system before the pandemics.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I agree. I don't think there's any crisis that the state does not use to expand its powers. And maybe after the crisis, they will roll back a little bit, mostly for show, but the core of that power will still be there, and the structure is there, and politicians have careers to lose by rolling back that power. So I think definitely that this crisis has led to more state power, and that we will see more state power than before the crisis after things get rolled back to the degree they will. So more state, definitely. In not as much in every country, of course, but still more.
No good options for the individuals and for individual freedom. Gerald, what is your take?
Yes, it's the same conclusion that I take, especially for the European Union, as at the same time as we have this crisis, we lost the United Kingdom as a part of the European Union, and the UK has always been a voice for more freedom and more market, which the Brexit shifted more power to France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, which will make the etatists more influential in the European Union on the long run.
But now provoking, and then I think Gerald mentioned it, that both Israel has never been part of the European Union, but interestingly, from the size of the country, but Great Britain is not part of it anymore, unfortunately, and they have proven, obviously, that with more than 50% of the population being vaccinated already, things can be solved and can be done. Where is the take? Where are the learnings? Again, where is it maybe, and this is my question to you now, do we have the wrong framework? Have we forgotten how to divide labor among politicians and statescraft? Or what is the right framework to solve those issues?
For me, it's that how the European Union, assisted by the countries, bought vaccines. It's a big management failure. So if you look, and it also last year we saw what every day lockdown costs the society. And then to discuss about prices of vaccines, and maybe not to buy more expensive, or to say, let's, for 300 or 400 million people, let's buy 1 billion vaccines, and if we get more than expected, let's shift it to other countries in the world. It's, for me, it's really absolutely a management failure, and you cannot say it was not known at this time, because we already in summer 4 months this pandemic, or 5 months, and we had a lot of experience to make decision in the other direction. It's really not to understand what happened.
But management, when you talk about management, I always think of private enterprises, or of enterprises at least, and companies. But this was political failure, wasn't it? The politicians as managers of our countries.
I think it was a combination. Okay, that if you compare it to private, let's say, okay, also the board members are responsible, but there were a lot of decisions also on a level down, and as I say, between people are working in the European Commission, but I don't shift all the responsibility to the European Union. I'm not bashing the European Union. I think it's also on the responsibility of the national states. And there is enough pluralistic system that also Austrian politicians, or also people in the ministries, high-ranking officials, had the chance to influence this process last summer. But it was more or less as I saw, but maybe Gerald knows better than I. But it was really a decision on cost side, and also believing, I don't know. So as I said, really not having the right information available at this time.
Thank you. Per, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add something about the management failure, because I think it was management failure too, but I think the problem is that management is a failure. And what I mean by that is simply that large organizations and large systems, they depend on management, and they depend on cost cutting and cost allocations rather than innovation and entrepreneurship and creation. Right? So they're backward looking and they're destructive. I mean, if you want to, it's a slight exaggeration, but the bigger the system, the greater the problem, because it becomes a one size fits all type of situation, and that never fits anyone. But I wanted to comment quickly on what you mentioned about the division of labor between politicians. And for me, the proper division of labor between politicians and the market is 0 to the politicians and 100% to the market.
Thank you. I have a radical question here from if Mises and Hayek are right, which a gentleman who is writing it is convinced, over the socialist calculation debate, why hasn't China collapsed so far? China is in its 6th decade of continuous economic growth. What's your take on that, or your answer? Because everybody of you touched upon geopolitics and China. Yes, Pierre, go ahead.
I think it is the same thing as what happened to the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1921, and they opened up markets a little bit, and then the Soviet Union could, and maybe not work, that's exaggerating a little too much, I guess, but it could stay in place and uphold power until 1991. And I think China has several things. First of all, there's a catch-up effect that they were far behind, and they just opened up, and they have deregulated in a very limited sense. So they have allowed businesses that are super subsidized to sort of roam free and do work freely and trade internationally. And they have had a huge inflow of labor from into the coastal areas. So there's a huge shift in where the population is. So they have been able to adopt a much more intensive division of labor.
Well, thank you. Do anybody of the Geralds want to add on that? Otherwise, no. Okay. Well, thanks on that. It's been a great debate today on market economy, trade, and geopolitics. I want to thank our guests, Gerald Gerstbauer, Gerald Loacker, and Per Bylund, for joining us today at the first Free Market Roadshow stop in Vienna of this year, Ways Out of the Gridlock. Let me remind you, you may sign in and review the debate at our Free Market Roadshow website, freemarket-rs.com. But also be aware, the next roadshow stop, this time unfortunately digital and not as a traveling circus from one city to the other, will happen in Belgrade. And the next event is Wednesday, 14th of April at 5 p.m. Central European Time at the University of Belgrade. Our host is the Faculty of Law and the Faculty of Economics. And the debate will be about IP, brand protection and patents, foundations of innovations. The keynote speaker will be Professor Enrique Schneider, and the panel discussants are Dusan Popovic, Mateja Durovic, Nikola Ilic, and the moderator will be my colleague, Professor Sinisa Taric from the university. Please do join us and promote free markets, promote ways out of the gridlock. Looking forward to seeing you all again. And thanks again, gentlemen, for joining us and for your insights. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for being such an excellent host.
Pleasure.